Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Perrin, and today we're going to look at my art style journey from 2003 to 2021. It's going to be quite the leap through time. Like many kids, I looked into copying official artwork as a starting point, and my love for art really took off from there. Alright, we're going to start with 2003. I was really into anime and video games, and that How to Draw a Book by Katie Coop. I think we can all recognize this one. I used this for my Final Fantasy fan art. I used it to make OCs. Like, it's all the same kind of eyes, like all across the board. The oldest Zelda fan art I can find is of Saria, which was probably the first character that made me fall in love with green hair. And this was like one of the few moments where I tried to do something on my own. And then there's Dot Hack. Copied this too. Copying official art, I think, was a very popular choice, not only for myself, but for other kids growing up, just to get that confidence boost. Well, if I can copy this and it looks close enough, then I'm doing it right, and I will be a good artist. 2004. This is my freshman year of high school. I got really into comic books for Shutterbox. I loved it so much. It was like, this is what I want my art to look like, with the thin lines, the very delicate details. Was a goth kid in high school, and this is definitely where it came from. Witch Hunter Robin, like, I did not stand a chance, honestly. It was Rave Master, which I loved this comic book so much that I ended up writing in my creative writing class, I wrote like a short story on it. I also got a piece of fan art published in it at some point, which really gave me a confidence boost that, oh my god, I'm good enough to be in my favorite comic book. Inuyasha was another one. This show really inspired me quite a bit. I thought, the characters are simple enough that I could draw that. I could definitely draw that. And I'm sure the piece that I have here is copied from like a wallpaper or a poster of some kind. 2005, it's my sophomore year of high school. I got obsessed with the gothic art style of Princess Ai. This cover, I think, is what inspired this piece. And of course, Zelda. It's another piece that I tried to emulate the same, like a similar style, especially with the boots, you can really tell. More Inuyasha fan art. Really loved these two. Trying really hard to get the thin lines and all of the cell shading details. 2006, I joined DeviantArt. It was my very first art account of anything, where I drew mostly comics, original characters. I was also really into angels. These two were Isaac and Irin. Isaac is black hair, Irin is the blonde. I don't remember all of their story really, but I just know they're angels with like a tragic backstory. There's another OC. I really did a lot of OC art with friends, but I'm still trying for those like super thin, almost invisible lines. Especially looking online, it really pushed me to think more about how I wanted my art to look. 2007. I also made a friend on DeviantArt. Her name is Nermina. Her handle on there is Ancient. And she taught me how to draw in Open Canvas. This is our very first canvas drawing together. Mine is the limey green color, and hers is the bluey green. And she was such a patient, sweet person to help me. She really taught me the basics of digital art, from drawing with a mouse up until I finally got my first tablet, I think later this same year. But I was still doing a lot of traditional work. Like, I started this color series with markers, OC comics, Pokemon Jijinkas were a popular thing on DeviantArt at that point. I followed my instinct of gothic kind of like punk rocker style and pieces from my color series, where I just drew in one color marker and that's it to make a whole drawing. I also was very much into Kingdom Hearts 2, and I really loved Sora and Riku. The influence of Kingdom Hearts is not just like their faces, but like the baggy pants. Like, Riku's outfit is like exactly the kind of outfit that I was drawing at the time. Like the baggy pants, the arm warmers, the zippers, and the big shoes. All is everything that I ever wanted. Another piece that I drew with Nermina. I think this was at the point where I had gotten my tablet, and my first experience using Photoshop with putting text in this comic that I did of a friend of mine that from high school. Her character's name is Digi. 2008. I drew every day in open canvas, pretty much, with Nermina to get better at digital art. A lot of these would not have been possible without her teaching me. I owe her quite a bit. I started doing a lot of couple art because this was also the year I started dating my now fiance, and here's our characters with his best friend and some of my OCs and some more OC work. Like, it was just a lot of digital art with original characters. 2009. This was when I graduated from homeschooling and I was just playing Final Fantasy XI most of the time. But one thing I started to notice about my work from this point and earlier was that I draw really, really big heads and very small bodies, but I started focusing a lot on the detail of the armor and the detail of clothing that I really hadn't so much before in a way that looked like anything. This is also the first time I drew my 11 character. This is the only good screenshot I can find of this outfit, but I tried capturing the way that the game looked for their designs. I was getting into this kind of like semi-realism thing while trying to hold on to my love for like big anime eyes and stuff. This Yuna drawing was the beginning of that kind of like, oh, I want to really try and draw her face exactly how it is here because it looks realistic. I was not successful in that. I remember being very frustrated with this piece because I thought I was drawing her incorrectly. 2010. This was my Vocaloid / Final Fantasy XI era where I revisited that color series I did from a couple years ago. Where just taking one color and drawing in it, but I did like chunks of color instead to try and capture all of the things I was into at that time. Like I drew Luca, but I also drew, because this was a turning point for me where I decided I want to be an animator. I listened to Rolling Girl and I loved it so much that I made this entire animation for it. I don't remember the program that I used, unfortunately, and I feel like it's impossible to find now because I thought I knew the name of it and it wasn't correct. But I made this whole ass animation because I loved the song. This was probably the longest animation I ever actually did because the rest I have are very, very short. This was also the year that I got my first traditional commission by Spirit Fingers on DeviantArt. You never really forget your first customer, and she was very, very kind. I was working in markers still. I was starting to learn how to blend in markers, not so much digitally. Getting that kind of understanding better of clothing folds and things and where things sit on the body. Meanwhile, in digital art, I'm spending a lot of time on details that don't necessarily need to be there, and this is like the beginning of my over-rendering literally everything under the sun era, and this is going to last for a while, so please bear with me. 2011, I got heavily into Pokemon at the same time I was playing 11, so we're continuing our trend of over-rendering the details and our big heads with small bodies, which this seems to have improved that a bit. This must have come beforehand, but we're putting a lot of details in the background. I keep trying to capture a sunset for some reason, trying to do more digital painting. I'm trying to draw in like singular colors, trying to do a lot of different things at this point. Fan art of Hilda from Pokemon Black and White, where I'm trying to make her face more realistic than the actual artwork looks, but I'm not necessarily happy with it. I just feel like at this point I'm supposed to make things look more realistic than they are. Even made our own Pokemon OCs. I'm sure I have a comic of these two floating around somewhere. We tried designing them after the Pokemon that we like to use. So I have Mighty Unisocks. I have my big shoes inspired from Kingdom Hearts. 2012, this is when I joined Tumblr, and this is when I really tried to do semi-realism. It's also when I started using Paint Tool Sai instead of Open Canvas. So this was the point where the internet communities were constantly putting anime styles down, and it only really escalated since I joined DeviantArt, where if you did not have a realistic or semi-realistic art style, then your art was not good. So I really latched onto that while at the same time trying to fight against it to draw what I wanted and what made me happy in a way that made me happy, and ended up not doing any of those things. So this was a turning point, but not necessarily the one I wanted. This was also when I started learning how to color lines and learning what clipping masks are. This was the first piece right here that I learned how to color lines, and then I went completely overboard because, oh my god, it's a new feature, that's so cool. And then this was another piece in the same program a bit later where I'm like, okay, I can color lines, but that doesn't mean I have to color all of them. And I think this was the point where I started to kind of like how my art looked, or at least that's what I was telling myself at that point, but I was definitely getting detail crazed. 2013 is when I started college, and I'm still tryharding for the semi-realism. This was a commission done for a couple that wanted a portrait of each other. Tried very hard to get the realism down, but also stay within the realm of, am I happy enough to make this? Is this like a fun way to draw something versus like, is it supposed to look a certain way? And this kind of continued through my commission work for a little while. And then we have this D&D group where I over-rendered everything, thinking that it wasn't going to look correct unless I did. Going from the hair to the armor to the clothing folds, like it was all so overworked to the point that it doesn't really look very good to me looking at it now, but I'm not sure if it looked very good then either. I had also done this with fan art for myself, and illustration work for friends. Like this was a piece for a friend's Final Fantasy XI novel that he was writing, where I really wanted to do silly faces, but I also thought I had to be a certain level of detailed, and it was clashing quite a bit here. And then I started playing Final Fantasy XIV, and this is probably my most detailed piece to date. Like, I have a lot of over-rendered work. Like, this Terra piece is really over-rendered, but the line art for this piece is just... I rendered every single little, like, cut and scrape and chip in armor in this piece, and I'm not sure why I thought that that was a good idea, but I did that, and I started to color it, and I don't know... I can't tell you how long I spent on this, but it still wasn't done, obviously. Like, I'd never finish this, and I don't think I ever will. If I'm going to put that much detail into something and it's still not done, there's a problem. So instead of over-rendering with the lines, I thought, well, if I can't do that, then I have to over-render with coloring. And that's what ended up with the hair like this. Like, I feel like this becomes a very common thing in my work. Also this year, I did a comic for a friend's contest about the journey in Final Fantasy XI. But my journey was like what happens before you start the journey. And the layout's kind of confusing, so I'm not gonna like zoom in too much, but it's basically my 11 character meets my adventuring fellow from 11. She helps him because he's lost, but he gets injured, and then he has to leave, and she wants to leave with him and swings from a vine onto the airship, and then he's like kind of forced to take care of her. And that's their beginning of a journey. 2014. This was when I moved to New York and started a new college. It was the year I felt like I had to prove myself super bad, and it was also the first time I ever did Inktober. So continuing our trend of over-rendering, this commission is probably the most detailed commission I've ever done in my entire life. But at the very least, we are starting to understand clothing folds, anatomy, in ways that I don't think was showing up in older work. But we are still over-rendering the absolute shit out of this hair, because that's what we thought we were supposed to do. I keep saying we, I mean me, and my younger self. Over-rendered and semi-realism showing up quite a bit because that's what I thought I was supposed to do, and if it didn't look that way, then I was doing it wrong. A lot of pressures to draw a certain way because of online communities. At the same time, I'm doing this traditionally with this extremely detailed Hydaelyn crystal, and I'm still trying to fight against that feeling with painting cute little things. It's like a tiny little act of rebellion, as silly as that sounds, to all of the, well, I have to draw a certain way feelings. 2015. I'm still eager to prove myself at this point, and I'm still tryharding on rendering and the semi-realism, but I think we're starting to calm down a little bit with the hair, and it looks like the beginnings of line weight, which if you have seen my work now, that you'll understand that I love line weight. It's like my favorite thing, and line art is my favorite part of the process. But until this point, it has not been a thing in my work, and this is 2015. We have some action-y poses where I'm starting to try drawing more movement in my work and trying to not be so stiff, because I remember being really concerned that that was a problem for my work. So these help me loosen up a bit, and I'm really happy with them still, honestly. This was also the year that I started a storyboarding class and was really like pushing my idea of I'm definitely going to be an animator because I can do storyboarding and I know what it is, even though I didn't really know what I was doing. It was just for a class, and I designed a character for it. Her name is Daphne. It's a little koi fish girl. This is also the year that I had an animation class and I designed my very first fairy drawing. This is Nina. She was the very first fairy I ever drew. And then I decided, I'm struggling with my work. Let's redraw something. So I redrew my Espeon and Umbreon Jijinkas in a way that I guess I thought they were looking more mature, you know, with the wine glasses in the back and not all of the plaid Hot Topic clothing. A fancy vest and slacks, and we have a nice sparkly dress with some slippers, and they're 7 years apart. Right, 2016, moving right along. This is my third year of college, where I'm struggling to find that happy place between semi-realism and the Glen Keane kind of style. But this is probably the most different my art has ever looked in the same year, I feel. And you can see the line weight is starting to become a normal thing here. But now I'm over-rendering eyebrows of all things. And eyes, like the whatever's going on in here. Like I remember trying so hard on this for it to look as realistic as possible while having an animation class and wanting to draw cute things. Like, it's pulling myself to two different sides. But I also tried a lot more painting this year. This was a school project. This was a challenge for myself. And it looks like I finally got that sunset painting I've been trying to get for like a couple of years on the Final Fantasy XI art. I started doing line weight in my commissions and my personal art. Like, this is probably the most apparent at this point compared to the year before, where everything was super thin lines still, and I was starting to feel like, well, this is a breakthrough here. I kind of like how this looks, and it's starting to set me on this different path of understanding what I like and don't like about my work. 2017. A lot of things happened in 2017. I graduated college, I started a new job, I started my Patreon. A lot of things were changing with my work. Like, we have this Mija drawing from Breath of the Wild, where I really, really loved her design, and I'm putting that line weight in there like I did with that commission. We're stopping the over-rendering of hair, finally. It's been a long time coming. And starting to like really get a handle on, like, if we're gonna render hair a lot, how are we gonna do that? Because we still have that a bit over rendered kind of look going on, but it's starting to become less in favor of making it like it makes more sense. But we're still doing the semi-realism. We're still struggling to find our style, but we're doing a lot of things. We're trying to paint. We're trying mixed media, colored pencils. We tried our hand at tutorials again, and lasso painting, which all that really was is how it sounds is you take a lasso tool and fill it with a paint bucket. And I wish I had the reference picture for this so you could see the difference, but it was a lot of fun, and I actually meant to do quite a few more of them, but I never did. We all have goals that we just forget about trying to achieve, right? Some more over-rendered kind of like shading and stuff for a Patreon reward, but we have at least gotten to a point where the hair doesn't look like we have to render every single strand, which is a really big relief, to be honest. 2018. Into the Spider-Verse came out, and that was a big influence. Like, the colors, the way things were rendered in that movie, like, I will watch it again and again and again. I have the art book for it. I can't say enough about how great this movie was, both visually and the writing, and I really loved it, and I tried to capture that feeling of, like, how much I loved it in this piece. We watched Hilda for the first time. I think it was around Halloween, and that's why they're making a little witch's brew over here. It felt a lot like the Gravity Falls show, and I really liked that. I think this is finally getting to a point, like, I drew this in 2018, and I still genuinely really like this piece. We've started to reach a point where I'm not over-rendering something to the point of hating it, which is a big step. We are also making more tutorials. I made these both in the same year, and they're still kind of like a bit messy with the delivery, but I think it's starting to get the point across, whereas I kind of struggled a bit with that before, because I'm a very visual person and I need everything like laid out in front of me for me to really get it most of the time. So I try to make my tutorials like that, and hopefully it's helped. I was also making a lot of traditional work, like this is a study on a Pinterest photo, and then I did my Inktober full of fairies for the first time, because I've started doing Inktober a few years before this, but this was the first time I did only fairies and found that it made me very happy, and I held on to that. We also have this commission piece that I did. I found out very recently that this piece that I did is one of the reasons why I was hired to work with the share organization, which is very exciting to know, honestly. I had absolutely no idea, but they said that seeing this piece in my portfolio is one of the reasons why they contacted me. So you never know. 2019, I started to draw fairies more consistently and ended up doing actual illustrations of them, as opposed to the only thing I did with them before was draw them traditionally. Draw them in sketchbooks. I would draw them for Inktober, but I never drew them digitally, and this was the first time that I started to do that and found that, oh wow, look at that, it makes me happy. But at the same time, I was still struggling a lot to find inspiration and feeling like I've improved it all. So I did another redraw, and this one is 10 years apart. So this was a character I made that's called the Star Creator. I struggle a lot to see improvement in my work, and it's helpful sometimes to do redraws, but even at this point, I'm still struggling to see improvement. To me, the anatomy looks the same, the rendering looks the same. I don't know how to explain it, but it just doesn't look any different to me. So I tried doing other things where I rendered without lines again and thought, maybe if I step out of my comfort zone a little bit, that could help. And that's what I ended up doing here with this Link's Awakening piece. This year I also started watching, or rather listening to Critical Role's second campaign and drew some fan art for them because I really liked the character designs. And I know next to nothing about D&D, but they inspired me enough to draw them. And you can see the over-rendered hair is starting to go away, the over-rendered armor and clothing is starting to go away, and we're reaching a point where it seems like I've calmed down a bit about the rules, quote-unquote, of art that I've had inside for so long. I'm still trying to do semi-realism. I think this child's face turned out pretty well. And we have our line weight that's starting to be a consistent thing. We have more tutorials where this is probably as clean as it has been, historically, through all of my tutorials. This is probably the cleanest one I've made. And it's probably one of the more easier ones to follow, I would hope. Because I always like to help teach people, but I feel like it's just confusing the way I explain things. 2020, this was when I got really bold with my work. At the beginning of the year, I hated my work in 2020. I hated it. I was in a bad place and I couldn't figure out how to make it better. And like everybody else, I was preparing for things that drastically changed because of the pandemic. Not all for the worse, of course, because it was the year that I hated my art the most, and then the year that I fell in love with my art, which has not happened to me probably in my lifetime. At the beginning of the year, I was doing these little tiny rooms. I was drawing little portraits for people, just trying to do something that would make me happy with what I was drawing, trying to make things that made me feel happy. And of course, I drew a cat, but I also drew one of my friends. And drawing for people does make me happy, but I wasn't happy with my art, is what it boiled down to. So one of the things I tried to do was not only just, stepping out of my box and I'm trying to paint more. This was a reference from a YouTube video. I'm trying to, this year I joined a lot of community projects. There was this one, the background is done by Skirtsan on Twitter, and it was called Just Add a Character to Their Background. So I added fairies. There was another where people would contribute comments to make a new OC for someone. And this is the demon OC that I made on Twitter from a collection of comments from people. There was Florisona, where you design yourself or a character based off of your favorite flowers. And my favorite flowers are irises. But she ended up looking pretty sad because, we're all going through a tough time in 2020. I also joined a Final Fantasy XIV community thing where you design your Dream AF set, your artifact equipment set from the game. And of course, because I love Monk, I designed a Monk set. And I felt like joining all of these community events made me feel less alone about my work, but also happier with it in a way that I didn't expect. I had also drawn a children's book, here's a page from it, for a friend that year, and I started working with the Share organization to do a educational comic, because I saved the one without text in here, but this is about ovarian cancer. and the ways that you can go about helping yourself and just like supporting women and people of color and the LGBTQIA plus community, like to get help with various types of cancers. Like right now we're working on another one. I can't remember what kind of cancer it was. I also took a hard turn back into my inspirations from teenage years, where I really loved Mega and Luca for Vocaloid. I started to draw things that I really liked, which is not normal for me because I had always had this problem where I can't draw fan art because it's not going to look the way I want, but then I drew Ysayle from Final Fantasy XIV. And it's like taking those little steps, and we can definitely see now, like I have stopped over-rendering here quite some time ago. We're deep into the line art. We are deep into line weight. It's a lot of things that I've come like from a lot of struggling of I don't like my work, but why don't I like it? Some commission work that I did the last year where it's just really like simple flat colors or it's color splashes, and this is the point where I'm like, wow, this is it. I really like my work now because I have let go of all of those things. I have let go of feeling like it has to be a certain way, it has to look a certain way. I've let go of those things and I have decided I draw this way because I like to and it makes me happy. And this is where my art style has taken me. We have come back to the big anime eyes. We've come back to more simple looking things that doesn't have to be so detailed. Very big learning moment in the last 2 years really. And that brings us to 2021. So it has taken me a long time to enjoy my own work again. This year I started drawing in Clip Studio Paint. So I switched drawing programs again. I made a New Year's resolution for the first time in I don't know how long, which was literally just to try new things, to allow myself to try new things. So I started a lot of new things last year, but this year too, and that included revisiting old influences and giving myself a chance to enjoy them again, like The Last Unicorn, for example. This was my favorite animated movie growing up, and I never in a million years would have drawn fan art for it because I was scared to. And here I am, drawing fan art for it, which is just insane to me. Like, I've come this far now. And to like your own work can be so life-changing, but it takes so much work to get there. It really does. I don't know if I would have gotten to that point had the pandemic not happened last year. I finally feel like I'm making my child self proud by drawing the things I've always wanted to, trying to draw the things that I never did, and living up to this imaginary expectation from many years ago. It's strange and freeing, and I feel like a screen cap redraw, like I never ever would have done that, but my child self is probably extremely happy because I love Sailor Moon. I just never really drew it because I didn't think it would look right. It's really changed my outlook on art for the better. All stuff from Clip Studio Paint. Like, I have tried so many new things this year that I never expected to, including drawing fan art for things that I love, like Skyward Sword Zelda. I'm drawing in a style that makes me happy. I dove deep into my Fairies. I made a coloring book last year and I actually published it this year. I can't fucking believe it. Drawing Fairies makes me so happy, and I'm very, very glad that I figured that out and I'm still doing it. I even started a webcomic this year. There's a lot of things happening this year that I never expected to do because of all those years of, well, I can't do it because it has to be a certain way. And we have reached this point that I am so grateful for in the art community. Everybody's so supportive of trying different things. Like, it doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to be a certain way to be good enough. Like, nobody's talking shit about anime style anymore. It doesn't, like, there's not some kind of like a lofty fucking like overarching opinion throughout the entire community that you have to draw a certain way, which really, really had a hold on me for a very long time. And now I've like reached this point where I feel happy with my work. Like, I'm gonna dive back real quick here because this Skyward Sword piece is my favorite from this year. And the last time I decided to give myself a chance to draw fan art for Zelda from this game was 2013, and I was not happy with it at all. Versus this is the piece I love the most this year. And I don't really have like a favorite art piece every year. That's not normal for me. But here we are. It's 2021, and I am chasing my fucking dreams finally, in a way that makes me happy. Like, this past year of my work has just been so different from every other year. I'm getting very emotional. It has been a very long time coming, and I just want to say thank you so much for sticking it out with me, for being there. If you followed me for a long time, if you just found me, whatever, doesn't matter. I'm happy to have you here, and I'm happy to share that you can fall in love with your own work. It is possible. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope that you'll join me on the next one. If you like this video and you like my work, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.